and these objections must be put in perspective. While we must be aware of the potential conflicts, we must not allow them to divert us from identifying the contribution that biomass can make, or from putting in place policies to facilitate its development. So what is the biomass that can make a difference for the UK? For policy purposes, biomass can be taken to include wood from managed and unmanaged woodland, energy crops like miscanthus, and organic waste materials including residual municipal and commercial and industrial wastes. The potential fuel resource across these types of biomass is immense. Just taking waste, England and Wales alone produce 27 million tonnes of municipal waste every year and around 60 million tonnes of commercial and industrial waste. These volumes are projected to grow by up to an average of 2% a year. This means that by 2020, England and Wales could be producing as much as 150 million tonnes of such waste every year. The national target is to recycle 50% of this by 2020, and that's an immense challenge given the escalating costs and the growing constraints on public spending. That means that as much as 75 million tonnes a year is available for diversion from landfill. Of that, about 65%, roughly 49 million tonnes, qualifies as biomass. Even where gas capture systems are in place to enable generation of electricity from the emissions from biodegradable wastes, every tonne of waste landfilled has a net equivalent CO2 emission of close to 300 kilograms. Sending that waste to an energy from waste scheme where it can generate low carbon and renewable energy could deliver substantial carbon savings. At Covanta plants in the United States, it's calculated that every tonne of waste treated saves 1 tonne of CO2. There are some key differences in the composition of waste here in the US, and there's a different fuel mix in electricity production. The result is that carbon savings in the UK are lower than in the US. Against the current generating mix in the UK, we calculate that savings are around 400 kilograms for every tonne of waste treated. Against the most carbon intensive of conventional fossil fuels, that's coal, the saving in the UK is about 700 kilograms per tonne. But what does that mean? This slide shows what a Covanta facility of the near future might look like. As I mentioned earlier, it would be a strategic facility handling both municipal and commercial and industrial wastes. For a plant with a capacity to process around 600,000 tonnes of waste a year, the annual carbon savings would be between 240,000 and 420,000 tonnes a year. The plant would produce enough low-carbon and renewable energy to power around 70,000 homes with the potential to underpin reduced electricity prices for local people. And it could deliver an annual saving on waste management costs for local authorities of around £20 million a year. Scale that up to the overall resource available that I mentioned earlier, and you can see that biomass energy from waste has the potential to make a substantial contribution to the low-carbon transition. Scale it up further to include alongside municipal and commercial waste, other important waste streams such as agricultural waste like poultry litter and straw, and forestry residues, and the contribution becomes massive. In total, biomass from waste sources could contribute around 3 gigawatts of capacity by 2020. This would be around 24 terawatt hours worth, roughly 17% of the total renewable energy capacity required by 2020. Yet policy at the moment does not envisage that we will make the most of this potential. Modelling by the Committee on Climate Change and by Ofgem assumes that wind energy will deliver most of the decarbonisation of energy supplies and of renewable energy. For example, the committee suggests that by 2020 there should be an addition of around 23 gigawatts of wind generation, and that's equivalent to around 8,000 large turbines. But as Ofgem notes in their modelling, such reliance on wind gives rise to significant risks through intermittency. To mitigate this, there would be need for a corresponding investment in backup, flexible, conventional generating capacity. There are two obvious issues here. First, given the history of planning difficulties that has afflicted the wind sector, perhaps even more severely than even the energy from waste sector, how sure can we be that development of this scale, of the scale required, would be possible? Bear in mind here that onshore wind at least will not benefit significantly from the streamlined planning approach of the Infrastructure Planning Commission. Nor can there be much certainty about the affordability of such an approach. Ofgem puts the capital cost at around 200 billion through to 2020. In the current climate of highly risk-averse funding decisions, there is a real question about whether banks could make that kind of money available when they will be comparing UK investment opportunities with competing markets across the globe. So I believe that if we are going to progress towards the 30% target for renewable energy by 2020, we need a policy framework that gives practical encouragement to a wider range of technologies. At present, we have a broad rhetorical support, for example, for biomass energy in a slew of policy documents, but the practical support is still lacking. For biomass energy, especially energy from waste, a number of key barriers to development remain. They are planning. Local opposition to new projects remains an issue, especially where plants are conceived on a strategic and regional scale.